when we look at the body of revelation in Scripture, the idea of God's redemption was never about one community.
No, absolutely.
And so for me, that's the starting point, that even in the creation story, God created one human race, one humanity.
Yeah, absolutely.
But that humanity is expressed in different ways.
Yes.
In the sense that different skin pigmentation, different geographic location people are born in. Paul was wrestling with this in Acts chapter 17.
Yeah.
When he talks about the boundaries, but he talks about from one man, God created nations. And is that so there is that body of revelation that, yes, in the Old Testament, God revealed himself to one community.
Yeah.
The nation of Israel, the people of Israel. But even when you look at that, it wasn't just the nation of Israel. There were 12 tribes. That already mirrors something, a kind of a prophetic symbol for the future, where God was actually heading with this. And we see glimpses of God breaking out of that one community to reveal himself to others, whether that's the story of Ruth coming in, or the story of Zipporah, Moses' wife, or you look at even Cyrus, who delivered the children of Israel.
Yeah.
They were expecting their deliverance to come from someone else. So we see this scattered in Scripture. And of course, by the time we get to the New Testament, when you were unpacking in Ephesians chapter 2, it talks about two becoming one.
Yeah.
So God's kingdom has never been about one community monopolizing it.
Yeah.
Going back to that biblical narrative, I think that is where we must take our cue from.
Yeah.
In terms of an intercultural, that mutual inconvenience. Paul was inconvenienced. Peter was inconvenienced. And you look at the church in Antioch, the way it developed. It developed quite quickly, not with just one culture, because the Grecian Jews complained against the Hebraic Jews, again, revealing the diversity already in the church.
Yeah.
So by the time you get to Acts chapter 13, Paul's first missionary journey, the commission was done by a diverse team.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think you weave that. So by the time we even get to Revelation, Jesus talks about, make disciples. He didn't say of one nation, make disciples of all nations. So we see all this weaved into Scripture. So this idea of different culture doing life church together, it's biblical. And I think it's one that we need to take seriously today. So there's a biblical rationale for this. But there is also a kind of a sociological rationale for this. Because as I said earlier, Britain is multicultural. And the thing is this, in a multicultural society, if we have multicultural churches, that is not countercultural. If we develop multicultural churches in a multicultural society, we are only mirroring society.
Yes.
We are only reflecting society. Whereas God has called us to be countercultural, to go the extra mile. And the only way to do that is to rise above Britain, multicultural Britain, and to develop inclusive churches, that is intercultural churches. Now, the problem is that they are difficult to build. That's the problem. That's the challenge. And not many people want to do that. If we are going to center intercultural justice, we need to move towards intercultural churches.
Now, I think you've really taken us on a helpful trajectory there when you say these are difficult to do. And there's a strand of missional teaching that said, look, actually, in order to most effectively maximize our evangelism, we should focus on reaching people who are like us.
Yeah.
And that's another strand of the background that's fed into the landscape that we have to some degree. And you're saying, look, actually, we need to be different. How do we take steps in that direction? Let's start with maybe a church that is just wanting to get going on this.
Yeah.
What are the first steps that they might take? So,
the first thing is this. We must realize that building an intercultural church is a journey. It's not a 60 meters sprint or a 100 meter sprint. It's a journey. It's a process. My mentor, who has had the privilege of leading perhaps one of the best model of intercultural church I've seen in the UK, Reverend Dr. David Wise is a Baptist minister. He led Greenford Baptist Church for about 30 years. So it took almost 30 years to build this. So you can see what we're talking about.
And worth just saying that discipleship takes time. And I love the way you said that actually it's a journey. It's a discipleship journey.
It is.
And if we know that in any area of discipleship, it takes time.
It does. Basically, put it this way, there's no one that just starts an intercultural church. You have to start from somewhere. In fact, you start from a multicultural church and then you head towards an intercultural church. One of the first things is to catch the vision.
Yeah.
Is to have a heart for this. Because if you don't have a vision or you don't catch that vision from Scripture, you might think what you are engaging in is political correctness.
Yeah, absolutely.
You might think what you're doing is basically pandering to society. But I like to see this as kingdom correctness, not political correctness.
Oh, come on.
And the reason why I like to see it that way is because it's biblical, as we established earlier. And so if it is biblical, can we catch that heavenly vision of God's pulse, of God's heartbeat revealed from Genesis to Revelation? So that's the first thing, to catch that vision. And then the second thing is to create intentionality around that vision, which simply means that a senior pastor or a pastor, for example, have to carry the leadership along. That's the second stage. You have to carry. It's not enough for the senior pastor just to carry that vision. Because if you only do, along the way, 5 years, 6 years time, you'll be frustrated if the leadership doesn't carry that with you. So you need the leadership to journey with you in this. And then the third stage of that is the congregation. How this become embedded as a vision for the congregation to see that this is what we are working towards. When you set those things in place, other things will soon begin to follow, because what you're simply doing is that yourself, your leadership, your congregation, they are saying, you know what? We want to focus, we want to dedicate our lives to this journey. The churches I've seen that are intercultural churches, that's what they've done. The senior pastor have said, you know what, I've got this vision, and then envision the leadership, and then in the process, envision the church.
Just taking up that point for a minute, on the envisioning part of it, I sometimes talk about the distinction between having a vision that is that says this is essential. Intercultural sort of church is essential, versus a vision that says it's instrumental. So it's a nice thing to do that might help our evangelism, versus this is a kingdom vision. As you said, I love that image of God's heartbeat sort of thing. And if things are instrumental, inevitably, if you're prioritizing, they can drop off the list. Because it's a nice to have as opposed to an essential. And there's something about just taking time to seek the Lord and ask, what does he want for us and for our church, and asking that he might give us that vision, that this is something that's an essential part of who we are. And once we get that, then that will feed into some of the other things that you're saying.
It will. Yeah, you're right. That it's got to be essential, which simply means it's got to be centered in our thinking and in our DNA, in our structure. So we'll be thinking about the church's organizational vision, organizational strategy, organizational structure. All these things, you have to intentionally look at them, how it exists, what we are trying to do with them.
Let's try and get practical. So you're saying vision, strategy, structure. The pastor needs to catch the vision, communicate it to leadership. That then goes to the church. And then you're saying that will create changes in the way that the church structures its processes?
Yeah, it will. It will, because it will begin to filter down into, okay, how do we do Sunday school? Who is leading Sunday school? What is our Sunday school team? What does it look like? Let's look at our worship team. What kind of songs do we sing here? And who are the people in our congregation? Which countries have they come from? Is there something that they bring to contribute to our worship team? Is there a style of worship that they bring to our worship team that can help? So you begin to look at, we look at our preaching series, we look at what we're doing with that, we look at our house group. So you're already looking at the structure of the church. And then in terms of strategy, you begin to think in terms of, okay, who is it that we have in the church? And who is it that we don't have in the church? But they are part of our demographics. And so you almost kind of do like a mission audit, which is a process whereby you look at the demographics of your church, you look at the things that you offer, and then you look at your local authority census details to look at who are the people in the area, what social services and etc. is already available, and what is it that you are doing. Then you match it against each other to see the gaps.
Yeah.
That helps you to begin to think in terms of your organizational structure. So that, for example, if in an area you have a lot of people from Afghanistan, but they are not in the church, then you begin to think, okay, so how can we reach out to them? Do we need to do like an ESOL class or an language class to bridge the gap as an essential service to help to connect with our community?
Yeah.
But that will start with mapping out and laying out what to identify what is missing, what is not already here, and what can we do to mitigate that.
So it's something about preaching and people that's coming through here. By preaching, I'm just thinking about teaching.
Yeah.
So there's teaching to the leadership team, but then there's, okay, what will the preaching program look like? If our eyes are open to it, we'll actually see it appearing as we're addressing texts, as we're working through books of the Bible.
Yeah.
And I've been struck by how often the text is specifically making references to people's ethnicity and cultural background that I've maybe just turned the dial down on, but are there on the face of the text and draw out the richness of what we're teaching.